I used to believe that being the older brother meant something. Not in a cheesy, sitcom way, but in the heavy, unpaid, carry-the-load kind of way. I was the one who stayed sober when our house was falling apart. I was the one who held a job at 16 because our dad blew half his paycheck on scratch-offs and beer. I didn't do it for applause. I did it because someone had to. My brother, Luke, was always the one people worried about. He was the charming screw-up, the one who could make you laugh even while setting the garage on fire. When he started using, it felt like everyone else finally had a reason to care about him. I just watched it happen from the sidelines. I held Mom while she cried, and I took Dad's keys when he tried to drive drunk to fix things. Luke overdosed the week I turned 27. I remember standing in the hospital hallway, hearing a nurse say he might not make it through the night. I didn't cry. I just sat there and thought, well, there it is. The worst day. But he made it. And when he woke up, shaking and pale and terrified, he gripped my hand like it was the only real thing left. He whispered, "Don't give up on me, man. Please." I didn't. I pulled together everything I had. Cashed out the savings account I'd built over a decade. Put my credit on the line to get him into a decent rehab, and when he got out, I got him into school. It was a small state college, not fancy, but it felt like a lifeline. I paid his first 2 semesters outright. Bought him a laptop. Drove him to campus every morning that first month because he was scared he'd relapse if he stayed alone. He told me he loved me. Said I saved his life. Said he'd make it worth it. And for a while, it looked like he meant it. He stopped flinching at shadows. Started dressing like someone who believed they had a future. He made friends, got invited to study groups, even got a little part-time job tutoring. He sent our mom emails with photos from campus, him at the library, him in front of a whiteboard, always smiling. She started bragging about him to the neighbors. Dad started calling him the comeback story. Everyone acted like we were watching a redemption story. No one mentioned that I was the one who quietly stopped going out, the one who maxed out a 3rd credit card to cover rent while Luke figured things out. I didn't need praise. I just needed him to stay clean. To make it. But little things started feeling off. I'd call him, and he'd let it ring. Or he'd answer distracted, say he was busy with midterms even when it was the first week of classes. He used to tell me everything, funny stories, frustrations, fears. Then it became surface level. Polished. Like I was someone he had to manage. Still, I gave him space. Told myself it was part of growing up, finding independence. I didn't want to smother him. I wanted him to become someone who didn't need saving anymore. Then, that Thanksgiving, he didn't show. Said he had a group project due. Didn't call. Didn't text. I sat at the table across from my parents, empty plate in front of Luke's seat, and just nodded when they said, "He's doing great, you know. We're really proud of him." I didn't say what I was thinking. That I couldn't remember the last time he asked how I was doing. That my bank account was in the red. That I hadn't slept a full night in weeks because I kept worrying the next call would be from a hospital again. I kept all of it to myself. Because I still believed that this was temporary. That eventually, he'd look back and say, "I didn't forget you. I know what you did." But he never did. And I hadn't even hit rock bottom yet. I lost my job 3 months after that Thanksgiving. It wasn't dramatic. No screaming, no blindsides. Just a quiet Friday morning meeting with HR and a folder with my severance packet. They called it a department restructure. I called it the moment the floor disappeared from under me. I remember walking to my car in the cold, keys shaking in my hand, and realizing I had exactly $212 in my checking account and a mountain of bills with my name on them. I didn't tell Luke right away. Part of me still felt like I had to protect him, like admitting I needed help would somehow knock him off balance. But after 2 weeks of microwaved rice, selling off my guitar, and fielding calls from credit card companies, I finally sent him a text. "Hey. Can you talk?" He replied an hour later. "Kinda slammed today. You good?" I stared at those 2 words, "you good," like they were a slap. I used to drive across town at midnight when he called me too high to stand. Now I couldn't even get a phone call. I told myself maybe he was busy. Finals, job stuff, who knows. So I gave it a few days. Then I tried again. "Hey man, just wondering if you could spot me a little for groceries. Just short this week. Promise I'll pay it back." This time, he didn't even answer. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that I finally got him on the phone. I'd called 3 times back to back, and I guess that guilt him into picking up. "Hey," he said, sounding winded, like he'd just run a mile. What's up? I told him everything. Not all at once, just in pieces. I said I'd been laid off, that I was trying to line up interviews, that I just needed a little help, nothing major. Maybe a couple hundred, just to get through the month. He didn't say anything for a second. Then he sighed. Man, I'm just trying to keep things stable right now, you know. Like, I've got rent, car stuff, it's not a good time. My jaw clenched so hard I thought it might crack. Luke, I'm not asking for a loan. I'm asking for the same kind of help I gave you. Just once. He laughed. Not loud. Just this small, uncomfortable chuckle. Come on, don't do that. That was different. No, I said, my voice tightening. It wasn't. There was a long pause. Then he said, look, I've worked really hard to get where I am, and I can't let anything drag me backward right now. I hope you understand. That line stuck with me for weeks. I can't let anything drag me backward. I was anything now. Not his brother. Not the guy who paid his rent for a year. Just an embarrassment. A burden he didn't want to claim. The next time I called my parents, my mom picked up. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd be different. That they'd listen. But the second I brought up Luke, she cut me off. Don't start, she said. He's doing well, and we're not going to sabotage that because you're struggling. I was stunned. So I'm the problem now? She got quiet. Then she said, you've always been a little dramatic, honey. Maybe this is a wake-up call. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. After everything I'd done, after everything I'd carried, I was dramatic. I asked, did he tell you I asked for help? She hesitated. He said you were having a hard time adjusting. That you didn't want to work. Didn't want to work. That night, I sat in my car outside Luke's apartment complex, the same one I used to help him afford. I could see the light on in his living room. Someone laughed. Probably him. Probably with friends. I stared at that window for over an hour, wondering what kind of story he was telling about me now. What version of me he'd edited together to make himself the hero. And that's when something shifted in me. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was something colder. Something quieter. Disbelief. Disgust. And this creeping, poisonous realization, he doesn't care. He never did. I wasn't his brother anymore. I was a receipt he didn't want to pay. I didn't hit rock bottom all at once. It was a slow drop. One quiet humiliation after another. First, I sold my car. It was paid off, but the insurance and gas were draining what little I had left. Then my phone got shut off. Then came the eviction notice. I remember standing in my living room, holding that paper like it was on fire, knowing I had nowhere to go. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall and laughed until my chest hurt. It didn't feel real. Not after everything I'd done to keep everyone else standing. That weekend, I packed everything I could into 2 garbage bags and a backpack. I crashed on a friend's couch for a bit, but after a fight with his girlfriend, something about me, taking advantage, I left in the middle of the night without saying a word. After that, it was just me and my beat-up duffel in the back seat of a borrowed car. I didn't try to call Luke again. I couldn't bring myself to hear him sigh like I was a problem he didn't want to deal with. But I kept thinking about that window, his living room glowing warm while I sat in the cold, wondering how the hell I became the one left outside. Then one night, I found an old email in a forgotten folder. It was from 3 years ago, before rehab, before college. Luke had sent it while still in detox, thanking me for sticking by him. At the end, he wrote, if I make it out of this, it's because of you. I'll never forget that. Ever. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I opened my banking app and scrolled through my old transfers. Tuition payments. Rent. Groceries. Some as big as $1,200. Some as small as $60. Over 3 years, I'd spent almost $28,000 keeping him afloat. And not once had he said, let me pay you back. Not once had he offered. I started pulling up documents. Student loan applications, co-signed agreements, emails from the bursar's office. I wasn't just a helping hand, I was financially entangled. My name was still on one of his active loan accounts. I remembered co-signing during a panic call in the middle of his second semester. He'd forgotten a form, or missed a deadline, something like that. I was working a double shift and barely read what I was signing. It hit me like a gut punch. I wasn't just broke. I was still legally on the hook for his life. That's when the cold part of me took over. The one that wasn't interested in sympathy anymore. I stopped thinking like a brother and started thinking like someone who'd been used. I called the loan servicer the next morning, asked for a full breakdown of the account. Then I did something I never thought I'd do, I froze it. I triggered the clause that let a co-signer initiate a stop due to fraud or default concern. It sent the account into review. Interest skyrocketed. Late notices got flagged. Within a week, it hit his credit hard. And it didn't stop there. I went through every shared document I'd ever signed for him. Insurance policies. Student health accounts. Anything with my name. I withdrew, revoked, or flagged every single one. I didn't make a scene. I didn't send warnings. I just vanished, legally and financially, like I'd never been part of his story at all. I got a call from our dad 2 weeks later. I let it go to voicemail. "You need to stop whatever this is," he said. "You're messing up your brother's life. He's got job offers on the line, and now his credit's shot. Don't be petty." Petty. That was the word he used. Not hurt, not betrayed, petty. Then the messages got more frantic. Luke texted once, "Dude, what did you do? I just lost an offer. My credit report's a mess." I didn't respond. He called 4 times in a row one night. I stared at the screen while it rang, and all I could think was, now you know what it feels like to be ignored. To be abandoned. The next morning, I got a knock at the door. Not a phone call, not a text, a knock. It was him. Standing in the hallway outside the rundown place I was renting by the week. He looked tired. His voice cracked when he said, "Please, man. I don't know what you did, but I'm screwed." I let him talk. Let him ramble about consequences and confusion and how this isn't fair. And when he finally stopped, when his voice got quiet and desperate, I looked him in the eye and asked, "Why didn't you help me?" He didn't answer right away. He just stared at the ground, like it had something more comforting to say than I did. Finally, he muttered, "I didn't think it was that bad." I laughed. Loud, bitter, ugly. "Of course you didn't," I said. "Because you never asked. Because I was never worth checking in on." He opened his mouth to argue, but I didn't give him the chance. "I kept you alive," I said. "I bought your second chance. And the second I needed mine, you left me to drown." He begged me then. Said he was sorry. Said he didn't know how far I'd fallen. That he was scared I'd drag him down with me. And for the first time in my life, I said nothing. I just closed the door. It would have ended there, if the universe didn't seem hell-bent on making sure I saw everything clearly before I walked away for good. 2 weeks after I shut that door in Luke's face, I got a letter. Not a text, not a call, a real, stamped, certified envelope. It had the university's letterhead in the top corner, addressed to me as the co-signer of Luke's educational loans. I almost didn't open it. I figured it was just more fallout, final numbers, maybe a formal notice that I was being removed from the loan. But something about the tone felt off. Too formal. Too careful. Inside was a summary of the account, tuition loans, enrollment periods, disbursement dates. I scanned it out of habit, eyes glossing over the bureaucratic language. Then I stopped. Enrollment terminated, fall semester, second year. Terminated. I blinked, read it again. Then again. Then I sat down, heart pounding, and pulled up my laptop. It took me 2 hours, several locked portals, and a long, awkward phone call with a woman in financial aid who definitely wasn't supposed to tell me anything, but eventually, I got the truth. Luke never graduated. Hell, he never even made it halfway. He dropped out after his 3rd semester. No degree, no active classes. He hadn't been a student in over 2 years. But the money? The tuition payments? The photos from campus and stories about study groups? All of it, fabricated. Or maybe carefully staged to keep the lie alive. I hung up the phone and just sat there. My hands were numb. My mouth was dry. He didn't just let me down. He didn't just turn away when I needed him. He'd been lying to me the whole time. He'd taken my money, my faith, my protection, and spun a fantasy out of it. One he could live inside, as long as I kept funding the walls. The study group photos? Probably friends from work. The cap and gown shot he texted our mom last spring. A staged prop from a graduation he never attended. He even posted it with a caption, "Against all odds." I laughed when I remembered it. A single, loud, hollow laugh that sounded more like a cough. I thought about all the nights I stayed awake worrying if he was okay. All the times I told myself I'd never let him fall again. And all the while, he'd already fallen. He'd just made sure I was the one who landed on the bottom. And my parents. God. I couldn't shake the feeling that they knew. Maybe not all of it. But enough. Maybe Luke gave them some watered-down version of the truth, said school wasn't for him, or that he was exploring other paths. Maybe they just chose not to dig deeper. Easier to pretend the golden sun was shining than to admit they'd bet everything on a lie. I started piecing it all together, moments I'd missed, signs I ignored. Like when my dad once asked, "So what's Luke majoring in again?" And I didn't have an answer. Because Luke had never said. Or the time I asked Mom if she'd visited his campus, and she'd waved it off, said, "Oh, you know, we don't want to embarrass him by hovering." They didn't want the truth. They wanted the story. And I was just the idiot footing the bill. That weekend, Luke texted me again. Just one line, "Please, let's talk. I'll explain everything." I didn't reply. I didn't need an explanation. I had the truth now. But I wasn't done yet. I spent the next few days sending copies of the loan default notifications to our parents. No notes. No context. Just the paperwork. I wanted them to see it in black and white. Not because I needed revenge. But because I needed the silence to break. It worked. The calls started that same night. Mom first. Then Dad. Then both. They left voicemails that swung from furious to panicked. "How could you do this to your brother? We need to talk about this, don't make it worse." And finally, from my mother, her voice shaking, "Please, just one conversation." But I didn't call back. I just sat there in my little one-room apartment, surrounded by peeling paint and the soft hum of a mini fridge, and let the world fall in on itself. Not mine, theirs. They'd built it on lies. I just kicked the foundation out. And Luke? He didn't call again. Not that week. Not the next. Maybe he finally understood that some bridges don't get rebuilt. Maybe he finally saw what it feels like when the person who always picked you up decides not to anymore. It's been 4 months since the last knock on my door. 4 months since Luke stood there, hoping I'd still be the guy who bailed him out. 4 months since I finally stopped playing the role I was cast in before I even knew the lines. I haven't spoken to him since. My parents still call. Not as often now, but regularly enough to remind me they haven't given up on the fantasy. Their messages have shifted from rage to guilt to something resembling desperation. It's always the same line in the end, "Please, just one conversation." But I don't owe them that. I'm not angry anymore. Not really. I burned through the rage fast, like kindling. It gave me light for a minute, clarity. But it doesn't warm you for long. What's left now is just quiet. A kind of hollow understanding. They chose the version of the story that made them feel safe. And I was never the main character in that version. I was a plot device. The one who shows up when things get hard, absorbs the damage, then fades out of frame. Luke was the one they believed in. Even when he failed. Even when he lied. Especially when he lied. And I can't fix that. I can't make them see me differently. But I can stop playing the part they wrote for me. That realization changed everything. I started saying no. No to their calls. No to the unspoken pressure to keep secrets or keep peace. No to the guilt I used to carry like a second skin. I found work again. It's not glamorous. A warehouse job. Long hours, low pay, but it's steady. And it's mine. I rent a room above a laundromat from an old guy who minds his business and always pays cash for repairs. I sleep without flinching now. No more checking my phone every 10 minutes. No more waiting for a disaster that somehow always belonged to someone else but cost me everything. The funny thing is, I used to think I'd feel lost without them. My family. My role. My purpose. But I don't. What I feel is something closer to freedom. A hard, cold kind. The kind you have to earn by hurting for it. But it's real. It's mine. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if Luke had just told the truth. If he'd called and said, "I dropped out. I messed up. I need help figuring out what comes next." I would have picked up. I would have shown up. But he didn't want a brother. He wanted a sponsor. And I don't do that anymore. There's a part of me that still hopes he figures it out. Not for me. For himself. I hope he sees the wreckage and realizes what he lost. But I'm not waiting for it. I'm not holding space for another lie. They all thought I was the one who fell apart. The bitter one. The petty one. But I'm still standing. Still showing up for myself. And they're the ones calling into the void, hoping I'll rescue them from the mess they pretended didn't exist. They used to say I was the strong one. The dependable one. The one they could always count on. They were right. They just never asked what it cost. And now I'm finally done paying.